Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Now, our focus in these sessions is to look at the mark of the beast, and today is the second presentation of 5 short presentations. My intention is to prepare Christians and non-Christians alike for the return of Jesus through observation of current events and how they are related to the Bible. We know that the mark of the beast will eventually become compulsory because it's been stated in Revelation 13 verses 16 to 18. But we are keen to know, are all the pieces in place to implement the mark? Even now, are we ready to implement the mark? Because if we are, then we know that we are practically at the end of times. Two major things need to take place, and I have summarized them broadly into technological factors as well as human factors. Now, in the last session, we examined the first of 5 sub-factors relating to technology, and that involve the elements or the factor called identifier. And we look at the UPC, the Universal Product Code, which was started in 1970s. Today we are going to look at the other 4. The first one we are going to look at is this thing called the implant technology. Now, this technology has been in place since the mid-1980s through the microchipping of animals. In this case, it is a dog. A radio frequency identification chip, or quite simply called the RFID chip, is placed underneath the skin of an animal in order to help us to determine its identity. It is a simple process currently administered by a vet using a syringe. Each chip possesses a unique identifier, and that's really the key, this thing called the unique identifier. We know that even right now, trials is being carried out on humans in places like Sweden, where people are prepared to take on the chip. And the surprising thing is they're actually paying for it in order to get the chip done. Now, having said that, there's another piece of technology that's important in implementing the mark, and that is this thing called the contactless payment technology. It was Mobil, the oil giant, that introduced the first system in 1997 to all its petrol kiosks. And that's 24 years ago. But today it is everywhere, and that's the important thing about it. Now, all these two elements alone have gotten Christians to be excited that the mark is upon us. And it is true that we are nearer to the end today than it was yesterday. But I think we are still a distance away, and I will explain to you why. Now, going back to the identifier, remember we started off with the UPC, right? Now, in 2009, India introduced a unique identifier for its population. That means every Indian now has a 12-digit unique identity number through its Ahad project or Ahad card. I mention it because the World Bank called the Indian system the most sophisticated ID program in the world. Many countries already have unique identifier for the population. Now, this is the Indian card. China, for example, has their own card, but it is 18-digit long. Unique identifier is compulsory for all her citizens. Most Chinese carry a card with them, with this identity card, and so do places like Singapore and Malaysia. And I know personally, because being an ex-Singaporean, I had my own unique 9-digit identity number. But in the Western nation, where privacy is a big thing, which we'll talk a little bit more later, no one wants a unique number to follow them throughout their lives. The free world values privacy. Hence, in New Zealand, I have a driver's license number which is different from my social security number, which is again different from my healthcare number. And these numbers are not linked. Eventually, it might be linked, and I'll tell you a little bit more. But this happened basically in 2020. Something else happened. A project called ID 2020 came into being, and ID 2020 wants to introduce a global identifier for every citizen of the earth. And that, in my opinion, when that happens, I'm not saying if, I'm saying when that happens, that will be a game changer. This new initiative has been launched by Microsoft, or ID 2020 is actually launched by Microsoft, Accenture, and an organization called Gavi, which stands for the Global Alliance for Vaccines and Immunizations. Its website says quite simply, it aims to provide each person on Earth a unique identifier because it argues that proving one's identity is a human right and that individuals must have their ownership over their own identity. Now, Bill Gates, Bill Gates, incidentally, the founder of Microsoft, is also the global sponsor of Gavi through his Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And in my opinion, he is a very important person that we should keep an eye on because he's pushing for this to take place. So the pieces are coming together even now as we speak. And the provision of a global identifier will be the real game changer to the mark of the beast. But it is insufficient to just have the global identifier. For it to fulfill the requirement of a mark, it must be able to buy or sell. And just like what Revelation 13 says, that is, it must be linked to a bank. Amazingly, India has shown the world how it can be done, because in 2017 it linked its unique identifier to the banking system through, again, the AHAT project. So effectively, an Indian can actually have its own global identifier, its own national identifier, and it is now linked to the bank. Obviously, the advertisers say at this moment, linking AHAT with bank account is not mandatory yet. RBI, I think it's the Reserve Bank of India, reviews in RTI. Now, I'm not sure about what RTI is, but basically what it's really saying is it is currently an option for Indians to not let it be linked. But guess what? The interesting thing about this promotion is that it says it's not mandatory yet, implying that it can be mandatory quite quickly. Now, the other thing that need to come around is the issue of the removal of cash from our system. Is it being done at the present moment? Not so, but you realize that countries by countries, this thing is taking place. We can start off with COVID-19 in 2020. Because of the issue of COVID-19, people are more nervous about using cash. And because of these places in Britain, for example, is seeing less and less people using cash and more people using contactless payment. Now, interestingly, also in places like China, they are introducing a digital currency. They introduced a digital currency in 2020, where it actually launched a promotion in October of 2020 in Shenzhen through a lottery to give away 10 million yuan of digital currency. But it's not only in Asia that is happening, right? Sweden, for example, intends to go cashless by 2023. So it is coming to various places. But the tipping point for it to go global is not there yet. For end times watchers, we have to pay attention to the technological factors, with the big one being the global identifier. When that global identifier pushed by ID 2020 and by Bill Gates come into effect, we know that it is even at our doorstep. Now, it took slightly 20 years for contactless payment to be established. It has been 35 years since the first microchip implant. And we know that it took 50 years for a identifier to be prepared, and now we are at the stage whereby Bill Gates is talking about ID 2020. Now, how long will it take before all these things come into place so that the global identifier is being adopted by country after country. Now we know that when all these things takes place, then truly technologically we are ready to implement the mark of the beast. In the next presentation, you will realize that it is the human elements that are slowing down the mark from coming into being. But we will talk about that in session number 3. I hope that you have enjoyed the presentation so far. Please feel free to share it with others that you know. Drop me an email if you think that you can help to improve this presentation either technologically or you can fund me. If you want to fund me, just go to the Patreon page that is listed here. Here is the address. Thank you very much and have a nice evening. Thank you. Bye.